The New York Mets introduced David Stearns as their president of baseball operations on Monday. I'll discuss what he said on today's edition, Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. Also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor and where I wrote an article today about David Stearns and his introductory press conference with the Mets. And I was blown away by this guy, as I think a lot of Mets fans were. He said everything right. And, we're going to go through my takeaways today, and I broke them all down in this full article. I sat here and I watched the press conference. I had it on one monitor and I'm ferociously typing on the other, and I ended up with 1,500 words of quotes. These are things that I thought were meaningful from what David Stearns said, because everything he said was meaningful. He found a way to seriously endear himself to the fan base because he's not faking this. The New York Mets are now owned and operated by Mets fans. And you could say, oh, they're too close to it, they care too much. To me, it at least allows me to know that everyone is operating in good faith, okay? Steve Cohen is investing all of his money, not all of his money, geez. He has more money to spare, but he's investing his resources into this team as the ultimate passion project from a diehard fan. And he now has an executive who seems to care about this team just as much because they come from the same thread as all of us, right? I'm sitting here in such a fortunate seat being able to talk about this team every day on this show and, actually call it part of my career. I feel extremely blessed to be in that seat. And I know the care and attention that I put towards my work because of the fact that I grew up rooting for the New York Mets. And I grew up wearing number 5 on my back on every travel baseball team I played for because David Wright was my hero. And to hear David Stearns today discuss the late 90s Mets that he grew up on and how he used to sneak into Shea Stadium and to watch that team and how Mike Piazza meant so much to him, it's so easy to resonate with him. And he said it in his statement right at the beginning that they put out the public statement officially announcing David Stearns, the president of baseball operations, before he even, spoke into a microphone. And in that public statement, he says, quote, "There is not an opportunity in baseball more meaningful to me than the chance to help lead this franchise. I grew up in large part at Shea. I lived and breathed Mets baseball, and I am thrilled I get to do that again." This is his dream. That was my biggest takeaway. This is his dream job. This is a guy that has done everything right in his baseball career. He started with the Brooklyn Cyclones working for a summer, to then an internship with that team that he grew up loving, the New York Mets. And then he, took all the different stops throughout his career, the big ones being Houston as the assistant GM and then eventually running the Milwaukee Brewers for the past 8 years, this last season in an advisory role, but 7 seasons as the general manager and eventually the president of baseball operations, the guy that was leading the charge there. He's Harvard educated. He wanted a career in baseball. He took every single step on the ladder to climb and get himself to the point where now he is taking over the New York Mets. Not just, the New York Mets he grew up on, a new New York Mets, where Steve Cohen is an owner with limited resources that is going to give him every opportunity to run this big market team like a big market team. There were so many things to like with what David Stearns says. One of the money quotes that I put early up in my article here is he says about how, or he discussed, how he used to sneak into Shea Stadium when he was a kid. And he says, quote, he now appreciates that they are letting me here without a ticket. Okay. A guy that, said he grew up listening to Gary Cohen, Bob Murphy, Ed Coleman every summer. And he says that, He knows how much this team means to our fans and our community. I've ridden the roller coaster of disappointment and hope along with every Mets fan. Let me say that again if it didn't strike you to your core. I've ridden the roller coaster of disappointment. You have to start there if you're a Mets fan, and hope. That is the naivete that we all have, along with every other Mets fan. He's in it, and he now gets a chance to actually be part of the solution to hopefully bring more hope and to avoid disappointment in the future. And he says all of the right things. Says I'm not, or he says I am working for our fans. I do not take that responsibility lightly. He credited some of the past people he worked with in the Mets organization: Omar Minaya, John Rico, guys that were running the Mets front office at one time. And he says, despite everything that's changed, the players have changed, the owners changed, the front office has changed. He says this organization's quest for truly sustainable, competitive, and ultimately our first World Series championship since 1986. That is the one thing that has not changed. David Stearns comes with the resume that you'd want. He's only 38 years old. He's clearly adept at dealing with the media. I think we saw that. I'll get to that a little bit further on because I think his comments about Pete Alonso in particular showed some skill as far as that aspect of the job. But he wants to be here more than anything. I think that's what stands out. He was asked about stepping down from the Brewers and why he made that decision. And what he explained was he felt, and he said it at the time, he wanted to spend more time with his family. And he wanted to reflect on his tenure and what had gone well along with what didn't. He said the only way to do that was to step away from that job, which he says requires, so much intensity, day to day running the team. And he said the only way he was going to jump back into that seat is if it was a special opportunity. He said it needed to be the right place, not only for me, but for my family. And this is probably one of the few, if not the only opportunity that would have allowed me to do that. He says that his friends and family have been overjoyed with the news, not only because they're happy for him, but they're just excited that the Mets have him coming. Like all of us have been excited by this news. And, he talked about it being a homecoming, of course, and how he's excited for his family. He says, it's cool for me that our kids get to grow up Mets fans now. They get to experience what I did growing up. I think all of us would hope that his kids get to experience something a tad better than he did growing up, but it's there for him. This is an opportunity of a lifetime. David Stearns has rise to the absolute peak of his profession. When it comes to being in an MLB front office, there is no position higher than president of baseball operations. And when it comes to his pick of all 30 teams, what is evidently clear, which is what we all assumed for years, we all thought when people were following these tea leaves dating back to when Steve Cohen took over the team after the 2020 season, people immediately pointed to David Stearns. And the reason that we all did is because we thought, here's a guy who came up in the Mets organization originally, who was supposedly a Mets fan, who grew up in New York City, all that stuff. Why wouldn't he want the opportunity to have the keys to this Ferrari and run the New York Mets with Steve Cohen's resources? And now it took some time, but here we are. David Stearns is running the New York Mets, and I think he is absolutely the dream candidate for Steve Cohen. And I want to go through that aspect of things, the road to Stearns that Cohen went on over the last 3 years, some of the things that Steve Cohen said in this press conference, and I'll also get into a little bit about how this all materialized, some of the things we learned there. I'll get to that in a minute. Before we do, today's episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Bird Dogs make you look good with the great stretch khaki shorts that are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving you a truly sculpted look. Bird Dog shorts fit way better than regular shorts that are made of that stiff, restricting cotton. Bird Dogs fix that issue. They have invented their cloud knit fiber that looks just like khaki, but stretches. So you get that way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. And they also put in the anti-stink sweat wicking fabric that will keep you cool and dry all day long. You can wear your Bird Dog khakis out on the golf course. That's my preference right there, to have shorts that pass the pro shop attire standards where you don't have to walk in wearing basketball shorts and just say, hey, still going to let me on the course? You have something as comfortable as those basketball shorts, but hey, they look good too. You can wear them at home when you're just lounging around. You can wear them out to dinner. Bird Dogs had that versatility. If you want to try them today, go to birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB or enter the promo code LockedOnMLB for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with every order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnMLB or promo code LockedOnMLB for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. They guarantee you that. So the next big takeaway I had from the David Stearns press conference was Steve Cohen and the fact that this is his dream candidate. This is the guy he's been waiting for, okay? The Mets have not filled that position. It's really a new position. He's technically the first president of baseball operations for the New York Mets. But since Steve Cohen took over, he has spoken about the desire to hire somebody in that role. I think one of the funny comments that came out of this press conference is someone was asking about his 3 years running the team. He quipped that it felt like dog years these 3 seasons. And in some ways it has been. There's been a lot of turnover. There's been 2 collapses. Well, not even 2 collapses. There was 1 collapse in 2021. I guess you could call 2022 a collapse in the end of a 101 win season where they got bounced in the wild card round. And then this year it was just all of the hype of the offseason to completely falling on their face. And it's been rough. And so Cohen has always had this desire to hire that guy who would come in, have the experience, have the respect, be on the cutting edge of the industry to be able to take things over. And he could just go hands off. He could just trust that his baseball operations was being run by the right executive that was going to not only win in the short term, but build that sustainable winner. And when it comes to David Stearns and the other executives like him, Cohen said there's maybe 4 or 5 in the league that are of Stearns' ilk. And he mentioned, those executives don't always come available. We've heard Cohen in the past sort of gripe about how in his industry, if you want a top mind in the field, you can just poach them from another company. There's no, strict contracts that bind people to those companies the way they do in Major League Baseball in a collectively bargained sport. Things are a little bit different. And so he's had to adjust to that. He's had to be patient. He said in the press conference, quote, "I have been really patient looking for the right person. As David and I got to know each other, it is clear that we are aligned in our thinking, that we get along very well." Now, the timeline of communication is something that I thought was really interesting to see Cohen and Stearns sort of dance around it. And when I say dance around it, it's only because I believe there had to be some form of back channeling. As much as David Stearns can say that he wanted to spend time with his family this past year, there's part of me with a contract that was up while he was sitting in a great situation in Milwaukee as far as, running an organization that he had built up with a team that was set to win for years to come, that he might have had an inkling that a better opportunity was on the horizon. So, yeah, maybe they didn't speak face to face, but I have to think that there was a little bit of back channeling. But the two of them were very clear on the public timeline of these conversations. Mid-August, when his contract allowed him to speak with the New York Mets, that is where these two sides began a line of communication. And again, things went really well, okay? But as Stearns said, quote, "Until you have a deal, you don't have a deal." So I try to stay pretty balanced and not get ahead of myself. When Steve and I first had the chance to meet in mid-August, that's the first time where I really thought, wow, this could be a fit and this could work. At that point, it was at the forefront of my mind. So again, he says it kind of a little bit there. Until you have a deal, you don't have a deal. Then he gets into finally having a chance to meet with them, which makes you think, okay, maybe there was a little bit of something behind the scenes. Regardless, that's what you have to do to get top talent. And the Mets didn't break any rules in this instance, at least not that we want to put out there that there was any type of tampering involved. It was all back channels, I'm sure, but the point was this was the guy to wait for. The opportunity finally struck. David Stearns was a free agent executive in mid-August. The Mets pounced on it. They got him a contract he liked. They brought him in, and now he is running the baseball operations. And here's what he had to say, Cohen did about David Stearns. He said, quote, "It's universal. The people who worked under David loved working for David. People described him as incredibly smart, thoughtful, open to new ideas, and is inclusive. It aligns with my thinking on how I like to run an organization. We've heard Steve Cohen sort of compare the hedge fund to the baseball team in this business, and how he tries to bring the most talented minds together and with his hedge fund, and you know work together to find solutions to problems and to figure out the market inefficiencies and to take advantage of them. And that's exactly what he's expecting of David Stearns here. And so now he's got that guy. He said when it comes to how he was approached about Stearns, he says, quote, "I have never seen such universal congratulations, and you got to hire this guy." He says that this has been going on for some time now, that people have been approaching him saying, this is the guy to hire. This is the perfect candidate. Well, now they got him. And the Mets are in position with an owner who will continue to provide resources, with an executive that's supposed to be one of the best in the game, who not only, is good at what he does, but is thrilled about the opportunity to be with the New York Mets and to potentially be here for a long time. The guy's 38 years old. He could be running your franchise for a decade and not even turn 50 years old. The Mets have a chance here to have a stable organization that will be able to finally have that sustainable winner that Cohen has been desiring all along. And as much as it's about winning that first World Series championship, it's also about just not having seasons like this one. And I think this year, in a lot of ways, ended up being a good thing for the New York Mets, which is a future podcast, I promise you, because it has now allowed David Stearns to get to work without a playoff scenario that gets in the way of it. He has some time now to get his feet wet, and the Mets turn the page to the David Stearns era with a great farm system, books that are a little more open than they were, in the middle of this season, and a chance to start contending in 2024, which is my next big takeaway. The Mets aren't going away. They're trying to win next year. I'll explain what David Stearns said in that regard in just a minute. Before we do, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into the action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including the spreads, the player props, over-unders, and more. And you can bet on these New York football teams if you want to. Things aren't looking too good, I'd say, for the Giants or the Jets right now. But hey, maybe you just want to bet against them to hedge your happiness a little bit. Hey, if your team wins on Sunday, great. If they lose, maybe you profit off it. Maybe that's the way that you navigate yourself through the NFL season. Or you can just, again, look across the league, see what some of the best spreads are, the props that are interesting, and find a way to enjoy the NFL action. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Remember when Max Scherzer said the New York Mets are not looking to contend in 2024? It's looking more and more like they just told Max Scherzer what they had to get him to waive that no trade clause and get out of town. Because guess what? David Stearns was asked about when he sees that sustained competitiveness that they were alluding to throughout the press conference beginning. When does it start? He says, quote, "Our goal is to begin that now. We are going to do our best to put together a team in 2024 that's competitive. We are going to do it in a way that does not detract from our competitiveness in future years." How exactly do you try to win without affecting your competitiveness in future years? Free agency? Could the Mets spend this offseason after all? I think so. Now, there's one market that they had to look at, the starting pitching market. And I will say that David Stearns did discuss that, and the fact that, having Steve Cohen's resources is an advantage that they take advantage of, but they have to make sure it's the right time and the right players to take advantage of spending. You don't want to lock yourself into a 7-year deal on Aaron Nola if you can get Corbin Burns next year. So it's weighing those pros and cons. But the Mets are going to be building a team that can win next year. David Stearns is in a process, and we'll get to that process in a second, of setting up his organization. But when winter meetings start and free agency picks up and there's trades happening, the Mets are going to be in all these conversations and looking to find a way to put together a team that can compete and get into the playoffs next season and make a run. That is the goal of the organization. So I think that was great to hear. And then speaking of some offseason tasks, the Pete Alonso takeaway I had was, David Stearns is doing a great job handling the media, and particularly with this question. So he's asked about Pete Alonso, and he says, quote, "I know over the summer there was some trade speculation, and I expect Pete to be the opening day first baseman this year. He's an important member of this team. He's an important member of this organization. I think we're very fortunate to have him." He also spoke about him being homegrown and a good clubhouse guy, is all part of the package that makes them love Pete Alonso, essentially. And he reiterated time and again, he's the opening day first baseman. What does that do? For one, quiets all the noise. They're not trading him this winter. Now, could that change if negotiations go terribly? Potentially, but I think it's clear that the Mets are either going to extend Pete Alonso or let him play out his final year and try to sign him in free agency. I think that is the course of action. And if the Mets have a horrible season next year and Pete Alonso is the chip that can get him some stuff at the deadline, maybe. But what Stearns did there is he, in one sense, made Alonso comfortable, and in another, didn't promise anything. And I think that just shows a guy that is really careful about his words. He didn't say, "We love him and we want to keep him forever." He said, "He's really valuable. He's going to be our first baseman next year," which is what he's on a contract to be. So I thought that was really good. Now, the steps moving forward and some of the other takeaways I had, you know, David Stearns now has to build up an organization. He's got to hire a manager, which is something that we will discuss in probably another episode this week. Who's going to be the next manager of the Mets? That's obviously on the forefront of everyone's mind right now. And he's got to fill out this front office. The Mets cleared the decks a little bit for him. He's got to make some hires. He said something that I thought was really interesting. He said, I want to dispel any notion that there is some magic formula to this or a secret sauce. There aren't any certainties in baseball. There are no guarantees of results. We can guarantee we're going to work really hard. We can guarantee that we're going to explore every angle, and we can guarantee an environment here for everyone associated with the Mets, an environment where they feel connected to the overarching mission of the organization and where they feel empowered to affect the direction of our organization. It's been my experience and my observation that when we do those things well, when we focus on those types of things, that generally leads to success and results. He wants to get everyone pulling in the same direction. And that type of leadership is something that I think has been lacking in this organization for a really long time. So it's great to see that hopefully they have the guy that can do that. Now, he has to meet everybody. And he talked about how, his experience with the Brewers and taking over baseball operations 8 years ago with them will inform how he handles it now. He knows he has to meet everybody. He knows that, as he said, the baseball calendar waits on no one. So he's got to meet everyone. He's got to get everything going. He's got to hire a manager. And ideally, you want a manager in place by the winter meeting. So they're going to cast a wide net. They're going to start that process. And then they also got to figure out how to bring in people to the front office. When it comes to that, he said, operationally, what we are going to do is try to build groups of really talented people at all levels of the organization, people who care deeply about each other, people who care deeply about the Mets, and people who are energized coming to work every single day. It seems like he is going to create a new culture for this franchise, and that is exactly what the Mets have needed. That's it in a bottle. That's what you want to hear. Now, the interesting thing is the guy that's been running baseball operations has been hearing everything in this press conference, and he's now got to go from leading everything to working under David Stearns. So how is that relationship going to work? Well, Billy Eppler and David Stearns have both been in the game of baseball for some time. And here's what David Stearns said about Billy Eppler. He said, "Billy and I have had a really nice relationship going back years as competitors talking to each other, whether it's about transactions or whether it's about industry events. I have a lot of respect for the experience he has in this game, the experience he has in New York, and I'm looking forward to working with him." So here's Billy Eppler, who has been in this market for a very long time with the Yankees and now at the Mets the last couple of years, who's been doing essentially the job that David Stearns is now going into. And now Eppler gets to take a back seat, but still be the bridge to the people that are still in the organization, to the farm system they've been trying to develop. And Billy Eppler is David Stern's best resource to figuring out all of this on the fly so the Mets can hit the ground running. And I honestly feel great about that duo leading the charge for the New York Mets. And I'm really excited to see the ball club they put together. And now we get to the fun part. We get to speculate on the moves that can be made. We get to look at the organization and what is still here and start to dream about what the 2024 Mets will look like, because I am encouraged now with this leadership in place that any culture problem that has been plaguing the Mets in the front office, in the dugout, in the farm system, developing players, any of it, I really honestly and truly believe that slowly but surely you are pulling yourself away from that Wilpon era. And now with David Stearns running the ship, to me, it feels like this is fully the Steve Cohen era. There's no more vestiges of the Wilpons. There's no more pulling yourself out of what the Wilpons left you with. There's now been 3 years to pour resources into this organization, and you now have the executive that Cohen has always wanted. So as I did a show about previously, the excuses go away with the hiring of David Stearns, but hopefully the problems do as well. And should be a fun time for Mets baseball, and I will be covering all of it here with Locked On Mets. So make sure you tune in throughout the week, as I'll be doing the much anticipated show on Juan Soto or Shohei Ohtani. Which one would you prefer the Mets to go after? We'll do some more fallout from, or not fallout, but reaction to David Stern's comments and his role with the organization moving forward, his next steps that have to be taken. So we'll go into all that stuff. So make sure, again, wherever you get your podcasts, you're subscribe on YouTube. Also join our subtext, because I was sending out texts throughout this press conference today. I'll be doing a lot of fun stuff there this offseason. It's a place where you get texts from me. You can ask me questions directly as well. It's a 2-week free trial to join. So find that in the episode description. Follow me on Twitter or X at Finkelstein Ryan, and follow the show at Locked On Mets.